Okay, now we are ready. So the CLE that we're going to start
Hola.
right now
Go ahead.
is how to run a judicial campaign within the law and ethical responsibility. This is a CLE class. You will receive the certificate at the end of the class. Just pass by my table and I will hand it to you. And the panelists are Attorney Anthony Suarez, CEO at Suarez Law Group, Senior Attorney and Chairman at Legal Services Clinic, Phillip Nichols, Director and Chief Strategist at Pegasus Strategies, and Honorable Gisela T. Laurent. She's judge from the 9th Judicial Circuit Court of Florida and Domestic Violence Division 41. So give us applause and thank you to our panelists. So now you can start. Mr. Suarez is all yours.
Thank you, everybody. We wanted to make, this course, as she just indicated, is also a course accredited by the Florida Bar Association, so that you get credits for this. And for those of you who are students and not yet ready, now you know that how to do it. Okay, and you'll have the experts one who's run the campaign and the other one that's what he does for a living. Let me give you a little background on why we're doing this, because this is one of the things that bar associations typically do, assist its members to gain access to the bench. This is particularly true for minority benches, minority bar associations, or specialty bar associations who want to ensure that someone who is from their and that is like if you're a workers' compensation judge, you want someone who's an expert in workers' compensation for that, or if you're the torts bar, you want to make sure you put a judge that understands that law very important to them. Therefore, they want judges who are trained in their law. There's our other guest. There we go. Okay. No, Judge, you're going to sit up here. You're going to judge. Who just joined us, Judge Luis Calderon, who also has run campaigns, and he's a circuit court judge of the 9th Judicial Circuit. And thank you, Judge, for coming. All right. So, I've had quite a bit of experience of running campaigns for judges and running campaigns in politics. But this is not just an art. It is a science. And so to running a campaign takes some art. Typically, the candidates provide the art. But it is the technician that runs the campaign that actually gets the job done for the person. That is a very specific skills, and that's why we have invited Phillip Nichols here to talk about that. So in previous seminars, I've taught a course called How to Get Elected Without Getting Indicted, because this is easy business to get yourself indicted in violation of a campaign election law, and can be fatal to your campaign, but it is really fatal for a judge because it becomes an ethical question. Even if you don't get indicted, there is a process to file a complaint with elections, and then just the complaint itself is something that you do not want to have on your record. So you may desire to be a judge, that's your calling, and that's good. But you need to know how to get that thing done. So what I'm thinking of doing at this point, I'd like to introduce the judges so they can give us a personal viewpoint about how it feels to run, because you're putting yourself out. Not everybody who's a judge was a politician first, right? They weren't politicians. They were lawyers. And some of them are shy and introverted. And all of a sudden you have to go out there and shake everybody's hands and people you don't even like. So I like to have a little bit of you, and let's start with Judge Gisela Laurent. Give us a point of view what it's like to be a candidate.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tony. But before we talk about the election, there's two ways you can become a judge: be appointed by the governor or an elector. We're going to focus on elections, but because we're here at the Puerto Rican Bar Association, it's important to understand, the players. If you are going to try to get appointed, know the players in the community. And Mr. Suarez here was on on a judicial nominating committee before, and he's also been for a long time the president of the Puerto Rican Bar Association, and so being involved, which wraps into campaigning, is so important for both reasons. Because if you're going to get appointed, if nobody knows who you are, the governor's not going to know who you are, and so the community really needs to know. So that's why the local bar associations like this one are so important, because you can have letters from them saying that they support you or you've been, very involved in the community. And then,
I was, as you indicated, I was on the Judicial Nominating Commission for many years, initially appointed by Lawton Childs, the last governor, Democratic governor in Florida, and then reappointed by Jeb Bush. And I helped many judges get through the panel, because that too is political, okay?
Yes.
So, go ahead.
yeah. So then, once you decide, well, first of all, even if you're appointed, you still have to be reelected, or elected, yes. So, elections are very, very important. I fall on the extrovert side. I'm not shy. I can talk. I never met a stranger before. Maybe that's just the way, being Latina, that's the way you're raised. Your family has people in your house from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes on the weekend. So, and you can be in front of a stranger and your dad will be like, mira, ponte a bailar, get dancing, show them your moves. And I'm like, okay, here I am dancing, 5 years old. And so we've all been there. Okay, I'm not alone. And so when I tried to get appointed, I applied the first time, maybe 5 or 6 times, and I got nowhere. And I was like, you know what? Yo soy de una familia humilde. I'm from a very humble family. My father and mom are blue-collar workers. We don't know any politicians. I knew Tony, but he's very important. He's very busy, too. And he was trying his best, but one man can't do it all, right? So I was like, I'm going to have to run for this, because that's one thing I can do is I can go to every Latino festival, Medina Festival, Calle Orange. I can go to every jazz festival, and I can talk my heart off to people and tell them why I want to represent our community and why I want to serve as a judge and what I believe I bring to the bench. And people listen to me because I'm funny sometimes. So, you have to, I think that what I learned right away when I started looking at everybody who was campaigning is that this is like a business, and that's what I studied in college. You have to build a brand, because you can't be all over the place. And so what I did is, people know I'm not doing it today, but look, I always had red on, and I was, so even if people didn't remember my name, they're like, that lady in red? Yeah, that was me. I was everywhere. And then I was in traffic one time, and I saw like Roto-Rooter. It was a wrapped truck, and I thought about my brand. I said, whenever I go somewhere and I see a truck, I take a picture of it so I can call them back later, like laundry on the go. I'm like, I probably need that service. So I decided to wrap my truck. And people would say, you're making a mockery of the bench. That's not judicial. And I said, well, I had to go back and read the canons. And they said, well, nothing that says here I can't wrap my truck, so I'm going to do it. So I operated a business. My campaign was me getting out there. I said, the person who's, the seats don't belong to you, us. They belong to you. They belong to the community. So I said, the person who works the hardest for the seat is the person who's going to win, and I'm going to be at many events to tell people my story, and they're not going to forget about me because I'm going to have a brand. And so that was my main
Judge Calderon, you've been on the bench now twice. You went to 2 elections, correct?
Well, one time unopposed. The
Right.
first time it was I had 2 opponents.
Right.
I ran the first time.
Okay. So tell us about, because I remember the first one. And I remember interviewing you during one of my shows. Tell us what it's like to be a candidate. Go on.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me. Just my experience when running was, so there's a couple of things. When you're running as a judicial candidate, it's very different from running from any other position. It's like you have one hand tied behind your back and the other one over your mouth, because you can't talk about politics. You can't talk about political affiliations. It's a non-partisan party election. And like Judge Laurent was saying, so what is left? You can tell your message about what you want to do, about how you're going to sit on the bench, how you're going to listen to people, but are they going to remember your reasons and what you say? Are they going to remember your name on election day? Listen, I'm very fortunate in that my last name is Calderon, because there's a Calderon in Venezuelan, Dominican, Puerto Rican, everybody knows a Calderon. Yeah. So when they see that name on the ballot, they have an idea. Or hopefully it's a pleasant memory. Hopefully one of my distant relatives didn't do something wrong. But my experience was, much like Gisela said, was honing into less than a minute what reasons you have for wanting to be a judge. To get that, what we call an elevator speech, down, concise, to get that message out, and to have some sort of branding, some sort of message, something that you put on your campaign sign that people remember. I had a campaign consultant, and again, because you're kind of very constrained, we're constrained by the judicial canons, and not just, it goes even beyond getting indicted. It goes beyond committing an ethical violation on the judicial canons, and you are responsible for the actions of your committee. So anybody who sits on your committee, you answer for. If they commit an ethical violation, that is imputed onto you. So the oversight is intense. Nothing gets done without your stamp of approval, because you will ultimately be responsible for that. Right. Well, this is the thing is, where it gets even more complicated is when you get to the point of fundraising, because you can't, all of that, but you ultimately have the stamp of approval. So, it's just another layer of kind of regulation that you have to deal with and considerations that you have to have. But as far as, actually being a candidate, it's a great experience. It's a very humbling experience, because as much education as you think you have to convince that person who shows up to that event why you're worthy of their vote. And this is a person who maybe isn't the most educated person, or maybe is somebody who just became a citizen who maybe doesn't understand the judicial process. It's very humbling, but it also makes you appreciate why it is you decided to run for this position. So I feel personally like every judge should have that experience, because it brings you back down to earth. You sometimes get lost in that building, sitting on the bench, and this reminds you have to answer for every decision that you make at some point in time.
You gave me two perfect segues, but I'm going to move on first. The first is asking for money. Okay, so I'm gonna ask for money, and the second question is appointment of judges for life, which is like the federal system, as opposed to getting out in the street. I like to discuss that issue there. But so then, before I get to those two questions, then let's talk to the guy who actually makes the magic. All right, that makes the magic happen, because you could be the greatest candidate in the world. If no one knows who you are, you're gonna get your name. You're not gonna get hurt. So getting your name out there and doing it in a way that you don't either get indicted or to have an ethical complaint, because those of you who are from Central Florida will probably remember that just recently we had a candidacy where a opponent of a sitting judge ran an ad accusing the sitting judge of being an inheritor of Mao Zedong, and that is, I understand that was halted, and the chief judge got involved, and fue bien feo. That was really un-American, much less holding the type of a judge. Now, that was an unusual circumstance that happened here in Central Florida, but I know there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. I've handled complaints with the Elections Commission where people have had violations because they took donations. They're not supposed to take donations. There's a whole law, and Phillip is going to get into, about how you take donations, how you report donations. All of that is very important. But so let's introduce you. You've got it in your plan, but Phillip Nichols is Director and Chief Strategist of Pegasus Strategies. That's what he does. You go to his website, you will see the amount of experience and opportunities that they offer to people who are interested in becoming candidates. So, Phillip, let me ask this question of you. Do you take every client just because they can pay you, or do you have a screening?
No, you have to screen clients. You might have 3 or 4 people in the same race that all have money. You've got to pick who you like as the best candidate, or who you think is going to be the better person sometimes. Not to say it isn't a business and you do take money, but certainly most of the time is choosing the person that you like out of a group.
So what's the standard? What do you do?
It's not really a standard. It's you talk to a person 5-10 minutes, ask them some questions, get a general idea of their personality, person. You research the person before you meet with them, of course, and you decide who you like best out of it.
So you just heard Judge Calderon say, getting the answer why I'm running. Is that an important?
That's the most important thing. If you can't tell a voter in 30 seconds why you want to be a judge, then you don't run. Don't bother. I mean, that is the most important thing.
So I've had candidates, and not judicial candidates, but political candidates. That you're saying, oh my God, they think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, But they're sitting there in front of you, and what do you say to them when you know they're going nowhere?
Well, I see that in partisan and nonpartisan stuff in judicials, and it's funny because you can be the most whiz-bang lawyer in the world, blah, blah, have been appointed by the governor, then you're up for election. And that's the only reason I created this. One of the rules, you can't say re-elect if you were appointed and blah. But, no, they think they're the greatest thing in the world, and you're like, no, I think I'm going to go with Bob. Sorry. And it's not just an ethical criteria, this or that. You've got to have candidates that want to listen, okay? Because I can be the best political strategist, campaign manager in the world, and if you don't listen to me and do what I tell you to do, then you're going to lose. In fact, this past cycle, I won a county court judge race in Seminole County, Judge Bowie. She's a new county court judge there. I interviewed one of the other candidates, and he said, well, I really like this form of advertisement. And I said, no, that's a waste of money. Don't do that. Oh, $20,000 or $30,000. I'm like, no, definitely no, waste of money. Nobody cares. He did it anyway, and I said, well, thanks for telling me I don't want you. Have a great day. Because the worst is knowing you can win a race and not being able to get the horse to go in the right direction.
Now, these are very difficult races because, as Judge Calderon is indicated, that, and Judge Laurent as well, that you really can't talk politics.
Well, I want to take it a step further. He said one hand behind your back and one hand over your mouth. I'm going to say both hands are behind your back. They tie your feet and then stick a gag in your mouth.
That's right.
Because
so how do you do it?
Well,
when you have your candidates, your hands tied, how do you do it?
Well, the first thing is you got to ask them, well, why do you want to be a judge? Okay, because you've got to go through a 6-month election process. You've got to have money, but you can't ask for money. You've got to have a social media page, but you can't touch it, but you certainly approve everything that's on it. You can't do hardly anything. When it comes to fundraising, if somebody walks up to give you a check, sorry, I can't take it. You got to give it to Bob over there. If you're in a fundraiser and they ask for money, you got to leave the room. It's just this bizarre process where you have to be involved in a political campaign, and yet you can't talk about anything remotely political. And when you don't do that, because things have become so diametrically opposite in today's politics, they assume you're the other. So on Facebook, if they ask you if you're a Republican or a Democrat, and you're in a predominantly Republican land, and you just quote the JQC. I'm sorry, this is a nonpartisan race, and it's not about partisan politics, and no matter my personal political feelings, I'll rule on the laws written at the time. Now they think you're the other side. If they're a Republican, they think you're a Democrat. That's why you didn't want to answer me. You're a Democrat. Thanks for telling me. And now you delete that on Facebook because it's partisan politics, and then they absolutely go apeshit crazy on every other form of media there is. You do nothing but inspire them to go out and tell the story of why you're a Democrat, and you're not. You're a Republican. You just have to keep your mouth shut. So the nuance of it is almost untenable in this day and age of partisan politics. It really is. Because, that's the first question. You Republican or Democrat? How many people ask you that question?
And they try to be slick about it too. So they're like, "Well, who did you vote for?" Especially when you're knocking on doors, because it's around that time of year. I think you're absolutely right. People make assumptions, and so you just have to walk away with that and say, "Wouldn't you rather know that politics?" I would kind of turn it around as like, "Why is that important to you? Wouldn't you rather know that your politics don't matter when you come into a law of court?" So sometimes their question, and I know it's rude to answer a question with a question, but sometimes you have to.
You have to, absolutely. Are you pro-life, pro-choice, pro-gun? Do you believe in the Second Amendment?
I will follow
there's
the
40
law.
questions that they try and get around the whole R&D thing with, do you have a gun permit? It's just always ridiculous how they ask the questions. You're like, I'm sorry, I wish I could talk about that. And in fact, I've got to cut off candidates sometimes. We were at a house event with someone, and there was like 20, 30 people in the room. And I cut off a couple people. I'm sorry, we can't answer that kind of question. My guy's standing there, he takes another question. And somebody actually goes, last year the Supreme Court ruled on this case, and how would you have handled that? I'm like, no, sorry, this is over. We were done now. they want to ask the craziest stuff, and judges can't talk about, but hello, my name is, and I promise to follow the law, and I love my dog, and my wife, and my child, and how are you? So it's very difficult. In fact, I think judicial races are a lot more difficult than partisan political campaigns, because at least then you get the benefit of, I'm an R, I'm a D, and the 30,000 assumptions that go with that, and I hate Bob, and Bob likes me, or whatever it is. Whereas judges, you can't get into any of that. And you can only raise money from lawyers because they're the only ones who give a flying flip who's going to be a judge.
So how do you prep them for this? You've just described a very difficult course. How do you prep someone who's been a lawyer, has been a litigator, is always taking a position, may have actually been already an elected official, or had run for office? How do you prep them to walk that fine line?
That is the difficult thing, and most of the time, the key is to not let them talk to newspapers. I do that instead of them, because I can say a bit more. I'm not employed by the campaign. You are my company, therefore I have a bit more latitude to say what I want to say. Or we send someone else to talk about whatever, so it's not you to a certain extent. There's a little bit more latitude. I mean, I'm not bound by the JQC, and as a consultant that was hired, but not an employee of the thing, there's more latitude, so says the JEAC and everybody else. But it's just to they're a bit more handholdy because you have to be there to cut them off and give a reason why they can't talk. You have to be there to stop things before they go sideways. Oh yeah, practice this, pivot. You Republican or Democrat? I'm a constitutional conservative. That is one word you can't say. Or I believe in a living document constitution. Depending upon your area. I mean, even though it's a nonpartisan race, don't think partisan politics do not absolutely integrate into a judicial campaign, because every nuanced word you have implies I'm a Democrat or a Republican. I'm a constitutional conservative. Now I'm a Republican. I believe in a living document. Now I'm a Democrat. Let's see. I believe in justice and equality. Believe it or not, that skews very Democrat. Or I believe in upholding the law, and I won't legislate from the bench. Now I'm a Republican.
Law and order is a big one.
Yes. But that can go either way depending upon where you're at. Which is why polling is so important before you actually start generating your theme and message. We've polled, I want to say, in 13 states for judge races, and I want to say at least 8 circuits in Florida. And you guys are lawyers. What's the number one reason why you want to vote for a judge? What's the number one reason you want? That's different. Okay. Sir? I would have thought you said experience. You got me with that. That was kind of different. Most lawyers I ask, they want experience. They want someone that understands the law, that, like their particular brand of law. Believe it or not, experience polls less than 5%. In any state, any circuit, nobody cares how long you've been a lawyer, what you've done, whether you know riparian water rights versus criminal law. Unless you're in a heavily skewed Republican or Democrat area, then if you were a former prosecutor, then you're going to keep people in jail, or a former public defender in a Democrat land. And I'm not leaning one way or the other for any particular reason, but just to go either way. Believe it or not, honesty, integrity, character, those always skew very high. Honesty, integrity, character. That's what they want more than liberal, conservative. Right. Now,
perfect segue. So now you want to be honest, you want to go in, and you need to raise money. So, George Laurent, how do you go about asking for money?
Well, we don't have to ask for money, like you said. You can't. We cannot ask for money. So, I mean, I've never, you form a committee. This is what you do.
Committee of Responsible Citizens.
Exactly. You form a committee, and when you choose your committee, you choose people, one, that are going to work hard, because there's a lot of things to do, and you'll find out that you'll have a committee of 50, and there'll be like 5 who are there all the time. So you want to pick people who are dedicated to you, that have loyalty to you and work hard. And you want to pick people who can pull in the money. Who are your big community leaders, like that have a nice office with a lot of space and can throw a big party, so you need to have those people on your committee so that you can say, I did a 5K club. And so when I was raised, I told all of my committee members, I don't care what you do. You throw a party or you just find 5 people, but you're in charge of bringing in $5,000. And that was something that they could handle. They said, I can do that. And some people did more. They could have a party and they'd raise 20, and they'd be like, I'm an overachiever. They love that, Or some people would go ask 5 friends for $1,000 each. That's it. And some people, they'd have to ask 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, but they got the job done. And so they all committed to be on the committee and raise $5,000. But that is how I am involved in making the money, is picking the people that I know want to see me get to the finish line more than anything, and are going to work hard and have connections.
All right, Judge Calderon, you're brand new. You're a young lawyer. You want to become a judge. This is your passion. But you don't have the money. You didn't start with the money. You didn't have. So how did you start?
Well, I mean, so for me, it was just about doing the work at first, is getting a reputation for being those other things, the honesty, the integrity, the reliability. So it was building kind of my brand as far as being a lawyer. Once you do that, I mean, I think a lot of things, I just feel like I was really fortunate in that most of my friendships and the relationships that I had just kind of happened organically. When I sat down to put that committee together, I was just embarrassed by riches, because all my friends were very accomplished. And it wasn't like, I'm going to be friends with you because I think you have potential. It was just like, we're just friends, we get along. And then you realize that the people they're friends with are also very accomplished. So when it came time to kind of make those asks, it happened very organically. But it started with kind of surrounding yourself with like-minded people. If you're an honest person, if you carry yourself with integrity, if you do the work, people gravitate towards that, you gravitate towards that. And so you kind of surround yourself by this circle of people who ultimately, I think, will raise you up when the time comes for you to do these things. So, I mean, at that time, I was young for running. Now, that age has gone way down because of the appointments. So now, the judges that are running for election after having been appointed are way younger than I was when I was elected. So, the youth thing, I think, I mean, back then it was you didn't even think about running for judge until you had at least 10 years of experience. Now I think the minimum is 5 years. So it was like, as soon as you get those 5 years, it's like, you're kind of already thinking in those terms. But I think that committee, like Gisela said, is what's instrumental in kind of raising that money, and kind of to your point, is being your handler. If you can't accept that check, so you never want to, I mean, when you're fundraising, you never want to turn down money that's going to help you get your message out. So when you have that handler, that committee member, that person next to you at all times, they can step in. It doesn't have to be your consultant, but they can step in and have that conversation for you and accept that check on your behalf, so that you don't have to, being Hispanic, being Latino.
How can I help? That's what someone's going to say.
Right.
And you're like,
You don't want to say no, because it's rude. If somebody offers you food, you don't say, I'm stuffed. You're like, okay. Yeah, I don't either. But I'm just saying, it's hard to turn down help when people are offering it in those circumstances. So it's very important to kind of select those people carefully. They're always going to make you look good.
Yeah, you didn't know that. Talk about sector. I handled a very high-profile criminal trial of a county commissioner who accepted a cash donation, which it turns out to be from an undercover police officer. And needless to say, that undercover police officer had a camera on his lapel, caught her taking the money, and putting the money to the side. And in there was $1,000 in cash. Total violation of law. Needless to say, she did get indicted. Right? So these things can happen. So that's why you put the intermediaries, and that's why they have these rules. So now the question goes to Phillip. Phillip, Florida's campaign finance laws are as complex as just about anybody's, and so what do you do to someone they want to be a lawyer, judge, because that's their calling, they feel they have a good mission, but have no idea how to collect the money, and second, file campaign finance reports?
We have some people in house that do that, just that. That's all they do is deal with compliance, state compliance of all reporting and this, that, and the other. It takes it out of the candidate's hands. Their wife and or husband, which ends up being the predominant treasurer, can't screw it up.
Because that's what happens. So they go, I got my sister-in-law. She's going to do it.
And they could be an accountant and the best accountant in the world, but if you've ever seen the state financial, what's it called?
The disclosure
No, they're the reporting system for the state. They're antiquated 1984 program that is just the most backwards. It makes QuickBooks look like AI. Okay, you've got to either hand enter this, and then if you press that button and it goes there, then here, and I filed reports for PACs every once in a while, and got a call, hey, you didn't file the report. I'm like, no, I filed it. I pressed the button. I did the 2 pins. I did this and that. No, you didn't go back and hit the reapprove after you. I'm like, it is just the most convoluted, complex, antiquated system on the face of the earth. So it's better that you don't touch it because then you're not responsible for it. And there is a certain amount of, on that anyway, when the state says, hey, you're $50 different. Yes, you've got to find it, but I didn't sign that. The treasurer did. You don't, as a candidate, you can't be the treasurer. I don't think you can be the treasurer, but you could be the vice treasurer if you want. But I wouldn't even want a candidate to do that. They think, oh, well, I can sign a check, but no, now you're responsible for the money. Leave it with an accountant, someone who's actually responsible for that.
For example, you have cases like this. I had a candidate that goes to a church, and they do a pass the hat. Everybody's passing $50, $50, and she goes, oh, I got $250.
How do I write this up? Yes, exactly.
And then report $250 in cash. No, bingo.
Or you're at a fundraiser, somebody just hands you an envelope, and there's $150 in cash. And you're like, who was this? No, I got to find him, give him $50 back.
So those are the problems. So the first thing is you need to have a professional to do your campaign finance reports. Not your mother, not your brother, not your wife, not somebody else. I don't have the statistical, but I bet the biggest number of complaints with the Florida Elections Commission has got to be violations of campaign finance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not intentional. It's just, oh, you're 5 cents off here. You didn't record this. The bank got you for a fee. You didn't put it on your thing. It's $500 fine.
Now you may think, oh, we could fix it. Oh yeah, you may fix it, but not before your opponent has found about it and leaked it to the media.
Absolutely, and filed the complaint. The ethical violation of the judicial candidate.
Know, you've got to answer questions from the reporter. By the way, and you got to find you have a complaint with the Florida election. I do. I don't know.
Right. Exactly.
So, all right. So this is one of the things you got to. Okay. Now we discussed, the financing discussions. Let's talk about this question about judges should be elected. Judges should be selected by. We have systems, right? In the United States, the federal judges are appointed for life. The psychology behind that, right, is in order to they be immune from being affected by the politics at the time. But we've heard some different experience here. People say it was a great experience to get elected. It brings me down to earth and it has some touch. In Florida, we have a two-type system where you can be appointed initially, then you'll have to look for election, but at least you're running as an incumbent in the sense that people know you. Say you can still use judge, even though you can say re-elect, but right. You can say judge. By the way, we could go forever on this course, but how you put your signs out. There's a rule. That's law.
It's funny. If you run for nonpartisan office, there's a very small section of the Florida Code that deals with nonpartisan offices. You can do A, B, and C, and D, but not E, F, and G. When you run for judge, you not only have the judicial canons, which are incredibly vague, incredibly and horribly vague, but then you've got the JEAC, which issues opinions as. So, can you use the word prosecutor in your election? No, you cannot, unless you're referring to the statewide prosecutor. Otherwise, it's an assistant state attorney or the state attorney, which most people have no idea what an assistant state attorney is, but they know what a prosecutor is because they watch Law and Order every day. So you use prosecutor in your mailer, and guess what? Now you're going to have yourself a nice JQC complaint that you improperly used the word, and it's right there in opinion 92-04 that you can't use that word. And if you don't go back and review those things all the time, and every disciplinary action of every judge that rolls around, you're not going to know the rules because the rules are not in one nice little book. They're all over the stinking place. They're in last year's complaints against judges. They're in JEAC opinions. They're all over.
So this is not meant to be a full course, on detail because that would take forever. But if you could, Peter, discuss with us, Phillip, sort of the things that need to be covered. How do you do your marketing? What type of marketing is the best kind of marketing? That kind of stuff.
Well, believe it or not, we take a very reverse approach to things. Some consultants might come up and say, hey, you want to be a judge here? I'm going to need $250,000, which may or may not be realistic, and that probably works for some people. But what I ask is, how much money do you think you're going to have to spend because we're not supreme fundraisers, okay? If you don't know the people, if you don't have a boat ton of friends, I can't generate that money for you. Nobody's a fundraiser for judges out there. Partisan offices, sure, there's somebody that can find the money, but not for judges. So what do you think you're going to have? And then we figure out the best way to spend it. Because everything in a political campaign, to a certain extent that you could do as advertising, can be effective. Is a billboard effective? Kind of, sort of. Is a billboard more effective than a mailer? Probably not. Is a mailer more effective than the digital ad they saw on Hulu this morning? Nope. Is the television ad better than this? Yes, sometimes. But you've got to look at the cost of such things. If you were running for a circuit judge in Orange and Osceola County and you wanted to mail an absentee ballot mailer to everybody, how many absentee voters are here? What do you think, like 200,000? Because it's both parties, Republican and Democrat. No. I think it's closer to 120, 130,000. And you need 65 to 70 cents per mailer. So on average, if you're mailing 100,000 people, it's going to cost you $70,000. So that's just for one mailer, one point of contact. Whether you're running for judge, donk, or whatever, there's one truth in politics. You got to say it on a fifth grade level. It needs to be 7 seconds long. You got to say it 7 times before anybody remembers it. Okay? So one mailer, you blow 70 grand, 1/3 of your budget. They saw it once maybe before they threw it in the trash. That's a poor use of your money if you've only got $150,000, $180,000 around here. You've got to figure out the best way to get the most impressions that's going to resonate with that voter. You got to go back and look at the likely voters, previous primary voters in a similar year, because governor primaries are very different than presidential primaries. The smallest primary, because all judges go up in the primary. If there's 2 people, it's resolved in the primary. If there's 3, the top 2, if nobody gets 50%, goes to the general. So you're always starting with the primary. Those are the worst for nonpartisan things because they are the core constituency. Republicans, Democrats, true believers. Independents can't vote in most of the races because we've got a closed primary system. So you're talking to the absolute core true believing Republicans and Democrats. So that's why the partisan stuff just jumps in right off the bat. So you narrow your voters based upon that. Now, what do they want to hear? What do they want to know? We always start with a poll. I'm like Gordon Gekko. I don't want to throw darts at a board. Somebody else can do that sport. I want information. So we start with a poll. What's the most important reason why you vote for a judge? And there is some nuanced variation. Do you prefer a younger judge or an older judge? Male or female? That comes into play because, believe it or not, most circuits in Florida, women predominantly vote more than men in the primary. Sometimes as much as 10%. And a female, it's been our experience that a female, when you're polling, 3 out of 4 times will vote for another female with no other information. So if you're a female and you're first on the ballot, you could have up to a 10, 15-point advantage going into it, just walking right in. Your name starts with A and you're a female, boom, you've got a 10, 15-point advantage. There was a study done out of the University of Texas 2 years ago, and on down-ballot races like judges, they say that first on the ballot can be worth up to 20 points, depending upon how much money spent. In certain areas, other states like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, they do judicial order out of a lottery machine because they have pick 3 or pick 10 and 40 people are running for judge. So they have a lottery machine. And generally speaking, the first 10, first 3, however many, those are the ones that get it. If you pull the ballot order, great, you're a judge. So Florida's got a pretty good system with the seats and this and that. You get a chance to actually beat somebody, hear about somebody. But you've got to start backwards with what you need. And digital, television are the cheapest, most effective ways, generally speaking, to reach people, especially in a market like Orange and Osceola or most of Florida judicial circuits until you get into the panhandle where it's a bit different. But digital...
Remember, if you're running for a circuit judge in Orange, it's Orange and also you're running twice the population than the mayor of Orange County. You know?
Or it's 3 congressional districts here, I think? 3, isn't it? 3 full congressional districts in the Ninth Circuit?
Right, that's right. So it's really huge, man. All right, let's take some questions. Anybody have any questions? Thinking about what we need to do. Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? This is the time. Go ahead. Please.
Hello. I'm a law student. I'm a 2L. I'm Macon, Georgia. So my question is kind of very specific. What do you recommend a student or maybe a baby lawyer do in order to kind of set themselves up in the future if they do want to go the judicial route?
I think he had the best advice right here, and it's network and meet a great group of people. Okay, because if you don't have the fundraising, if you don't have people in the community that can talk about you, get out there, you don't have that support, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So being social, getting out, getting involved in the community, joining organizations, groups, things like that.
So I'll say also, you start the work in law school. I speak with law schools all the time, and I tell them, in this room are your future judges, your future mayors, maybe the governors in here, our future governor, the future president. And so you working hard and taking law school very seriously is important, because people will remember, like, oh, she was always partying in law school, or that person, always did well and was very involved. And so you start your reputation in law school. And then once you get out of law school, you start your reputation at your first job. Always being prompt, prepared, and professional, treating other people with respect, especially opposing counsel. Because when it's time to run for judge, whether you're being appointed or you're running a campaign, like my colleague said, Lewis, you have a network of friends and relationships. I believe in life, everything is relationship building. Every job that you have, every position that you hold is relationship building. You can't run a bar association without good relationships and people who want to come and support you and grow and come to the meetings. And you can't be a judge unless you've fostered good relationships starting from law school. Sometimes when you're trying to get appointed or even get people to help you in the community, they go back and say, what's the strongest connection I can find to X? And I'm going to tell you, it's who did they go to high school with? And so it's hilarious, like, oh, I know this person from high school. I'm like, well, you're the man. You're going to go talk to this person, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z. So the relationships are strong, and they've already started, and you've already started walking down that path. If judge is what you have in your sights, just always make sure that you protect your reputation and your relationships.
I mean, I was just going to add, there's very, yeah. No, I was going to say there's very little to add to that, but I will tell you that, we were talking about like those limitations that you have with regards to money, and when you're talking about doing a campaign, there's also manpower, and that bigger that network is, the more involved you're. Look, if you want to serve the community, you got to be part of the community. Like Judge Laurent was saying, like, you can't just sit in your office all day and do work, which is great. I mean, absolutely do the work. But you also, your church, their civic organizations, because you're going to have this army of people that where the money can't go, guess what? They can knock on that door and have a human connection with that super voter. Right. And so if you're not members of these organizations, you're kind of insulated. And you're not going to have those experiences to know how to talk to different people. So that's all I would add.
And from a client development point of view, don't post on social media. Here I am with a beer. Here I am with this. Oh my God, look at this! Because there are websites and people like me that, for the right amount of money, can find that picture of you your freshman year laid out on the table with a beer in your hand. Yes. So be careful what you post on social media, what you take a picture of, what you leave in the cloud. It's all out there.
I have a simple question. You guys have mentioned, I would like to know why you guys decide to be a judge.
So I'm one of the rare few that wanted to be a judge as the first thing I ever wanted to be, like firefighter, astronaut, judge. I was probably 5 years old. And
Watch too much Perry Mason. Good Lord, what is that?
No. I think the Spanish people in the room can relate. Like, your parents were first generation immigrants, and my dad only gave me two choices. He said, you're gonna be a professional woman when you grow up, and I said, what does that mean? That he said, that's a doctor or a lawyer. I'm like, okay. So I didn't like blood or getting shots or anything like that. I faint, I throw up. I'm like, so I guess I can't be a doctor. I'm gonna have to be a lawyer. And so when I started looking into what lawyers do and on TV, I saw the judge, and the judge would listen to everybody and hear both sides and make a decision. And when I would see the judges in the movies, they would always be this old white man, which is nothing against old white men, but I said, why is there never, a Latina? Back then, Ana Maria Polo wasn't around, and there wasn't Caso Cerrado. So when I'm little Gisela, 5 years old, I didn't see a Latina on the bench listening to both sides. And I said, you know what? That's what I want to be. And I was actually the first female Hispanic elected in county court in Orange County, and I was the first female Hispanic appointed by any governor in our circuit for circuit court. And so that dream is still very real to me, and I'm constantly involved in organizations that inspire and support female Latinas to become judges. Nothing against the males, because I love them too, but I have that in my heart.
At least you're not white, man.
No.
Well, I will tell you, for me, I mean, it kind of happened little by little. When I was really young, I kind of had this idea, like, you say, well, there's the lawyers. Who's the lawyer's boss? And you're like, oh, the judge. So, obviously the judge is the boss. But I think as I got older, it just became like really a calling. You practice the law and you love the law, and then you become a lawyer and you're like, okay, well, you're going to do this much law and this much getting clients. And then you decide, well, I want to be my own boss, and now, because you want to be the boss, and now it's running a business and this much law. So to me, I wanted to help people, which is, I was a public defender. I wanted to help people. That was important to me. I wanted to serve. That was also important to me. I'd always volunteered, active in my church. And so when you combine those two things in the law profession, I think you're going to come to the clear, conclusion that service is being a judge. So that kind of is the combination of really distilling what you love about the law, which is the law itself, legal issues, and serving people. And so for me, it was 1 + 1. Just one day I woke up and I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is where I fit in. This is how I can give back. And it does give you a platform, like Judge Laurent said, to give back, to not to walk away and turn your back, but to help the next person up. So, we take interns, we speak at law schools, at undergraduate institutions, because we want to inspire people. We don't want it to end with us, and just like the people who came before us didn't want it to end with them. We want to see more Latinos, more Hispanics on the bench. We want to be embarrassed by being, one of 100 Hispanic judges. So ultimately, to me, that is the thing, because I didn't realize it was possible to me until I saw somebody who looked like me with that robe sitting on the bench and saying, I want to do that.
I forgot what the question was, but I was going to make before this because I was listening. But I think you asked it. But it was a question with regards to the importance of who you know and people knowing your message. So Gisela was, and how you act, because Gisela and I met as opposing counsels to each other. We had a very contested matter. I can tell you to this day, I have no idea about her client. She doesn't have an idea about my client. We had coffee afterwards and we become good friends. But that brings, when she's running for judge, that goes back to integrity. Even if we were friends, we never disclosed our clients' positions or to even talked about the case. So, and also I was very involved in the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I was in the board of directors at that time. So who am I going to promote? I mean, you are capped with money, but you could always send a message out of who you want on the bench and who is going to be fair and impartial, which is one of my biggest things. And I don't care about how old you are or what age. Well,
the problem is that character, honesty, integrity, impartiality, those are complete non sequiturs that it's hard to convey to a voter. Mm-hmm. Those are absolute. I've got to be honesty and integrity and character. Well, how do I know that? Anybody's going to say that. You've got to convey that by other means, either with other people talking about you and endorsement stuff, like you were just talking about, friends that can do that, or imagery. The guy's got a wife and 2 kids, and oh, look, the perfect dog with a bandana around his neck, and maybe he wouldn't do that. So you've got to convey that sense in a way that is more nuanced than your traditional. I mean, nobody cares if their state representative's honest. They know he's not honest, which in fact is why experience plays against people running for judge. Because the more you talk about how lawyerly you are, lawyers are just behind used car salesmen for believability and integrity. So the more you talk about I was a great lawyer, they're like lying bastard. So they're never going to vote for you for judge. So the hardest thing and the first thing I do with my candidates is personify them. Who are you? What do you do? What do you like to do? I've won judicial campaigns talking about his commitment to youth sports. Because who doesn't like the guy that built the football stadium for the little kids to go out there and blah, and you're above the fray. It's that lets you talk about that character and integrity and that sort of thing. But you've got to personify the judicial candidates, and that's some of the hardest things to do sometimes because...
Yeah, I was just going to say, but this is a perfect example. You have Marivet on your committee, and she tells that story in front of a room of people. She said volumes about you that speak to your integrity and your character. So, I mean, this is the importance of having people like that and having those organic relationships. Because you never thought when you have that case, it would be easy to go down, the race to the bottom. But clearly, what you all took away from it was this is a person that, even though they're my opponent, I respect them. I trust their ethics, and now you have a spokesperson that just happened organic.
Yeah. This is for Phil. My question, being an operator, and for people who are thinking about running, how do you rank it? Mailer, text messaging, social media ad? What would you spend your money
It all
on?
depends on your budget and your geography and your circuit or county. Okay, if I'm running a campaign in Putnam County, Florida, which is 8,000 voters and they're all back there up there in them woods, man, I'm not going to try and text message them, man, because that's just not the way to go. But you're in Orange County, and all of a sudden I've got a lot more people, and I've got superior cable penetration and digital ad viewership here, social media. I'm going to advertise a different way here versus even Dade County, where there's more people, and how do you reach that particular segment? So it really is a function of where you're at and how those voters are. Because you look at, and Florida's a very diverse voting group, county to circuit and circuit to county. The panhandle of Florida is very, very different than the Orange County market here, which is very different than like the Fifth Circuit, where you get into Citrus County and Hernando County and Marion County. Orange and Osceola is still very different. So it's really what fits that area. There's not necessarily a one size fits all. I love text messaging, or I love this, but predominantly what I will say is that the digital ads, okay, and cable is about the best way to hit the most number of people with the least amount of money, just as a general rule. Okay, but when you get into certain areas and you got to micro target people, and I want to micro target Puerto Ricans, and I can pull that demographic data, then I want to text message those people with a very specific message as to why you should vote for Bob or Irene or whoever, because then it's a very micro-targeted thing, which text messaging and social media and that sort of thing is the best way to reach those kind of people. So it just all depends.
If anybody's feeling this way, I remember going to my first path to the bench and hearing all this information, which is very important and very true, and being like, ay Dios mío, like, I don't know if I can do this. How can I raise all this money? How can I do this stuff? And I'll tell you that is important, having the strategy, having the money, but not everybody wins. There's campaigns that one person will outspend the other, and the person who was humilde, was able to talk to the community and get out there, and what I say, like, work the hardest, wins every time. So don't be afraid, because the science is important. I respect this job because they know who's a super voter, but for remembering when I was sitting there, that was kind of scary. Like, I'm never gonna do this. My dad has a body shop and my mom sews. I'm not gonna do this.
Most of the campaigns we win, our candidates have less money than our opponent. Okay, money is the ability to communicate with someone, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do a good job with it. I've seen plenty of people waste lots of money or have a horrible message. You can have a horrible message and spend lots of money. You can spend lots of money on the wrong kind of advertising. You can do both. So there's lots of ways to lose with more money. Money isn't the key. Money is a factor, but it's not a key factor. It's your ability to communicate with people and reach the right message to the right people, whether it's knocking on doors or whether it's television ads or whatever it is. But it's not always a function of money. No, it's not.
I mean, we have the luxury, Gisela and I have the luxury of sitting here from getting to the other side and looking back. But it really is a confluence of factors that it feels like the stars aligned. You're in the right place with the right message at the right time with the right consultant who made the right decisions, because it is an art, a science, and there's a lot of luck involved too. But you got to put yourself in the best position.
It's like baking and cooking. Okay, they're two very different things. Baking is very science. Okay, you put the wrong amount of cornstarch in or something like that, it's not going to rise and it's horrible, it's screwed up. But in politics, it's a lot like making a stew or a soup. You might have more potatoes than you wanted. You don't have enough meat, but guess what? You can balance that out with a little bit of this and still make a great soup with whatever ingredients you've got, whereas your souffle would not rise and it would just go to crap. So, yes, political campaigns are art and science, and it's making the perfect stew.
I want to thank our guests. So let's give them a big round of applause, please. Judge Calderon and Judge Laurent, thank you so much for taking time of your life. That's why you're here. because you're the kind of people who are willing to take time out of the bench. They don't have to be here. They don't get paid for doing this. They come in because they know it's important. And one time they were there, where you guys are sitting now. They're here. And Phillip, I want to thank you. Because I didn't get to know you. I got you through your website, and I was impressed with the work that you've done. I have done some of the work that you've done. I know how hard you guys work, and it's like I said, this is a science. Elections are a science. Then there's the art part. So with that, I want to tell you thank you all for coming.